The Vietnam War started on the 1st of November 1955 and ended on April 30, 1975. Countries colored red are considered enemies of the United States. Blue countries are allies of the US. Red countries are communist and allies with China, the USSR, and other communist countries. China became communist in 1949. This led to rising worries in the US of communism spreading in the form of the domino effect. This war is a difficult history because a lot of new experimental weapons such as chemicals and napalm, also known as liquid fire, were used for the first time. This led to a lot of civilian casualties.
What is your relation to the Vietnam War?
My relation to the Vietnam War, it is, uh, when I was young, so that is a very long time ago, it was on daily news on the TV, and it was like a daily horror show. Have you seen all the pictures with the helicopters and then they drop the napalm bombs? So that is from my, I was then about 6 or 7 years old. Those images are very heavy for to see for a kid. So I remember, maybe you've seen that also, the picture of the naked girl running out of the village. Yeah. So and in the later years, that is about 20 years ago, I met this girl, who's now a woman, in Berlin at a symposium about the Vietnam War, and she spoke there, and she is still full of all these scars from the napalm attack. But it was definitely that girl who told them the story behind the photograph. It's amazing. So she told that she and her little brother and the rest of her family were living in a village in Vietnam, and there was an American convoy of army trucks passing through, and somebody shot at the army trucks just a couple of times. So the Americans quickly left the village. They stood a few miles further up on the road. They halted and phoned to the headquarters. We're being shot at. Oh, where are you being shot at? Well, we're here and there on the road, kilometer so and so. And then they just had to wait. And the girl remembered that it took about 20 minutes between the shots at the trucks and then the aeroplanes coming in, the starfighter jets. And they dropped the napalm bombs over the village. You know what napalm is? It's petrol with a binding agent. So it sticks to everything and it burns up in flames. So then the napalm bomb dropped, and the village and all the people in it were set alight, were ablaze with fire. So she and the little brother, they burnt more or less totally, all the skin burnt off, and heavy wounds. And she took her clothes off, of course, because those were on fire, and started running on the road towards the Americans who had just been passing the village 20 minutes before. And that's typical of the Vietnam War. There was a TV crew was present with the troops. So the TV crew recorded the shooting, recorded the bombing, and recorded those people, including that girl running towards them with the camera rolling. So the whole world has seen this picture, and she has told it. She survived it. She went to the hospital. They fixed her up, and she had scars all over her arms and her face. And she grew up and then emigrated to Canada. And ever since her life as a grown person, she has been repeating this story with the object of stopping war in the world. Okay.
How old were you in this time period?
So I was born in 1965, and the war lasted until 1975. And actual fighting that went on was when I was, I remember the Christmas bombardments, 1971 or 72 it was. That you remember this song from John Lennon? So this is Christmas. That was the time when we've celebrated Christmas in Europe and the United States, but at that Christmas time, the bombs were falling in Vietnam on those people. It was a rough war with a lot of violence, and it was live on TV every day. Every day we had in de Zuid-Vietnamese hoofdstad Saigon, in de Noord-Vietnamese hoofdstad Hanoi. It was mostly the starting of every news bulletin.
Is there anything unique you can tell us about the war?
About this war?
Yeah.
Well, what I mostly like about it is that it was the subject of many films. So it was such a horror. It was such an unjust war. Those people who fought for their cause, and they were being bombed out by the Americans, and the Americans could not win. So more and more violence. That has been the subject of many films. And one of the best films, well, we got it all right over there in the film department, is the film called Apocalypse Now. Ever heard of it? You ask Mr. Wijzig to show you the scene with the helicopters where the American soldiers fly in, with the helicopters, and they're gonna surf while other helicopters are bombing the town, shooting all the people. They have the world champions surfing on board, and they're gonna surf. That shows you how completely ridiculous and sick this war was.
What is something everyone should know about the Vietnam War?
Yeah, it was the Vietnam War is always used as a tool to compare other wars. So the Americans were a superpower with the atomic bomb and the best trained troops and the best weapons in the world, and they lost completely in this war. They really lost it. They hastily left the country in the beginning of the 70s, and then it was a year and a half of break, and then in 1975 the communists took over all of Vietnam. They just lost the war, and it was a hopeless case. It was an excessive lot of violence took place, and it shows you that this was it was madness. So it is always being used for comparison. The Americans started another war in Iraq, for instance, and everybody said, "Oh, it's going to be another Vietnam," which actually was the case. Yeah, they lost that too from ISIS. Yeah.
What parts do you think of the war is silenced or a difficult history?
The difficult history was that the Americans, when those guys were just like you, well, a little bit older, and they were drafted. Yeah. They were sent into the jungle in Vietnam, and they didn't want to go, and they were being shot at by an enemy who they could not recognize. So it was a traumatizing experience for them, and they started to do a lot of drugs. Maybe you ever heard of the drug heroin? No. So heroin was introduced in the rest of the world by the Vietnam War because the American soldiers came back home when they were addicted to that stuff. But that drug makes you totally insentient. So what the Americans did was a couple of massacres. They killed whole villages, smashed babies with their heads against the wall because they were so hopeless, so scared, and so stoned out of their minds that they didn't know what they were doing anymore. And that is, it was all into the, it was made public, it was on TV, and later on you had also the Pentagon Papers. Ever heard of it? Pentagon Papers? That was where journalists asked for documents which said that the Americans already knew in 1965 that they were going to lose this war, that they were never going to win, and that they still kept going on sending in more men. In 1969 it was 500,000 boys, and into a totally hopeless war which they could not win. They already knew it, but it was the Cold War going on. They could not lose face against the communist enemy. So that was a hidden history, but it was uncovered, luckily. What the military learned from the Vietnam War is that they never ever again take on journalists live in the jungle. as a journalist, you can apply in any war, and then you go with the military to a specially selected site where they're going to show you that they are winning. But in Vietnam, they didn't do so. And the journalists just went along and talked to the soldiers, and the soldiers, they were so extremely drugged and traumatized and crying and wanted to go home. That gave the war a very bad name, but yeah. You know?
That was it.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
No, well, gladly done, and I hope you will learn something from this interview.
Take a look at that same map from the beginning of the war compared to the end of the war. Countries are still colored blue or red depending on their alliance. Approximately 2 million casualties of both sides occurred during the 20-year period of the war. Roughly 627,000 of those casualties were Vietnamese civilians. That's a lot compared to the US and the Allied 282,000 military deaths. Like we stated previously, the end of the war came on the 30th of April in 1975. The end of the war came with the invasion of South Vietnam by the Communist North Vietnam and surrender of Saigon. After the invasion, the North and South became the Unified Socialistic Republic of Vietnam, ruled by Ton Duc Dang,